officers, members of staff, thank you for being here this evening for the Broadland District Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee pre-cabinet meeting. We will start by reminding everybody that this is a public meeting and it is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Agenda item 1, does anybody have any declarations of interest? I'll take that as no. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence and any substitutes.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies.
Oops, sorry. Let's switch off now.
We have apologies for Councillor Karimi Givanlu, Councillor Yousephian, and Councillor Yousephian's substitute is Councillor Orber.
I'll just add, for those who are unaware, Caroline is out of hospital and feeling considerably better, but not 100% yet. So, but certainly from what I've seen of her, she's looking much more her old self. So that's a positive. Item number 3, the minutes of Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 26th of March. Can we check those for accuracy? Any matters arising from them? Assume everybody's happy. We'll take them as read. Item number 4, Chairman's announcements. Other than the fact that you might want to talk about the fact that we have arranged some extra training, do you want to do that? I mean, I'm forcing you to make my announcement, but there you go.
Yeah, of course, Chair. So we'll be looking to get a date for some training in the diary towards the end of May, early June for the committee. So we'll cover general principles around overview and scrutiny. But if there's anything in particular anyone would like to cover, please do let me know and I'll make sure that's in the training.
Thank you. Item number 5, public speaking.
There's no public speaking.
Okay, let's move on to the Cabinet reports. Our agenda item number 6, but Cabinet report, our agenda item 7, policy for residents experience domestic abuse. We've got lead officers Richard and Mike. Thank you, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to apologise in advance because I've got a few reports on today, so you're going to have to listen to my dulcet tones for quite some time. Yes, most of these are mine. Okay. So, first policy to discuss is the domestic abuse policy for residents experiencing domestic abuse. So, this is a really important policy to bring together large elements of our current policies that we have throughout the council. We, as a council, have decided to go for DAHA accreditation. That stands for Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. And as part of that accreditation, you have to review your policies and have one overarching one. It's really important for our residents, though, because at the moment you have to go through various elements to pick and choose wherever the domestic abuse support may be. Although we have the help hub, and that's a simple way of calling up, that's an easy way to do. But if you want to look at what your council should be doing for you, you've got to look in various places. This is a one-stop shop for all domestic abuse issues. To give a bit of background, the DA Act came in 2021, placed greater responsibilities on local authorities. DAHA is a really useful mechanism just to give us the framework to make sure that we're going to meet all the elements of the Domestic Abuse Act. Following Domestic Abuse Act, we have seen a 62% rise in domestic abuse presentations. This is largely because it's the awareness has come out, but also the thresholds has become lower, as it should be. We're now able to support domestic abuse legislatively as we would like to. As part of this work as well, we've provided, we're making sure there's mandatory training being pushed out to all staff this year. And for those who need more bespoke training, we're really relaunching the Domestic Abuse Champions, which I believe in last council, Councillor Hartley detailed that's also being made available to some councillors. All other councils and in Norfolk are going for the DAHA accreditation and numerous housing associations as well. I wasn't going to go into any more detail because it's a big, long policy, but I'm happy to take any questions. But the recommendation at present sits at Cabinet to agree the policy for supporting customers experiencing domestic abuse. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Fran.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Richard. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, really. I mean, one you just touched upon about training, but are we going to do training for members? Because I think that would be really, really important, because we haven't really done a lot of training for members. I think members would benefit from understanding domestic abuse better, obviously to work it within this. But actually, the other question was, and once again, you touched upon it, it's 2.5 on page 18. You're talking about, obviously, all the other local authorities are working towards DAHA accreditation, which is fantastic. And you mentioned Saffron in the paper here, but how many other housing associations are doing this? I mean, is this sort of widespread? Are we getting the big ones like Clarion, etc., buying into this, or not? Because obviously that would be really helpful. Thank you.
I don't know for certain on Clarion off the top of my head, but I will be amazed if they're not doing it, especially with such a big organisation.
Yeah, but we'll clarify that.
We'll clarify that 100%, but I don't want to say definitely doing it, but I will be shocked if they're not going for this as such a big organisation. In respect to member training, I would normally turn around and look for Emma here. I think we did make some available. It's just that I don't want to promise member training when there's such a structured member training process.
Just to pick that up, we had last December we had an awareness session which Councillor Weinmark attended, along with some others. We have 47 members. I think we had 7. And what we did it just before December, when we know there's a rise in domestic abuse. So I've spoken to Emma Hodds about it, and of course all member training we can't mandate it unless there's very specific items. But it is something that I do want to keep on the agenda once we've gone through DAHA accreditation, as we're going through, just to kind of raise awareness session. And I think I'd be open for ideas about how we do that with members. Is that more formal? We put it online because it was December and it was rainy, so we thought that would attract more people, but it didn't. Maybe coming face to face. So, but I think it's such an important issue, and this is all about local engagement. So absolutely, Councillor Weinmark was something we want to do, and I will continue to try and promote that, and we'll see what we can do.
Mark, then Paul. So will we be looking at using our newly acquired housing stock to assist towards this?
So we have already in place, we have safe accommodation. So we can use our newly acquired housing stock if we wanted to, if that's so fit. But the qualification to gaining that properties are that you have to be homeless, and there's a cascade that goes down. So it's going to be available just like our allocations policy to all, and some may go to domestic abuse. However, we do have safe accommodation set aside, so it's specialised temporary accommodation with sanctuary, so cameras, better locks, etc., to make sure that they're safe. That's already in place for both Broadland and South Norfolk to utilise.
And certainly on that as well, we've got our sanctuary scheme, which we've worked with the county council on. Our handy person go out and actually it's working really, really well. And actually where we have to bring people in, that's important, and we've got the facilities to do that. But as important is to ensure that we can beef up individual homes, because ideally we want that victim and if they've got children to stay in that house, because it helps with schooling and their wider remit as well. So yeah, so that's an important area as well.
Hi, I've got a couple of questions, and it is on housing. 3.2 of the policy talks about committing to supporting people to remain safely in their homes. So I'm not an expert on this, so it seems to me that if you've got domestic abuse, then that sort of goes against the grain that you'd expect them to, you'd want to put people in places of safety. So first question I have is, can you explain the reasoning behind that? Because that doesn't, it's sort of counterintuitive to me. Second one is, how does this policy link with county council's social services type function that they do? This is not clear in here how that connection happens, and is it two separate things? Do they link together? Explain to me a little bit about that.
So I'll take the first question regarding, because it kind of goes on the back of what Mike was just talking about, the sanctuary scheme. Yes, 100%. If people say, I am not safe, I do not want to return, I am homeless, we will support people to get out of that potentially dangerous situation. You do, however, see people who will not flee because their support network is within the area that they live, and they just want to be made to feel safer in their current accommodation. So that's where the sanctuary scheme is seeing so much success, because it's giving people options. We're not there to tell them what to do. We're there to be able to empower them to make the decision what's right for them. That's why we wanted to put something in the policy that says what used to happen is, if you're not fleeing domestic abuse, it can't be that bad, therefore we're not going to support you. That was in the old world before the Act came in. Now it's about it's their choice, and we need to be able to provide them with a various range of options to allow them to choose the right one for them. If they just to move on, if they go through that route and it still becomes dangerous, there's nothing stopping them coming to us and presenting as homeless, but that's no longer safe, and we would continue to support them in that way. So I'm going to answer specifically with DA here. Our threshold for DA is very, very low. So yes, it very much would be, we would say, they come in, you can't flee. We don't tell, the burden of proof is no longer, we'll prove it. It's now, we believe you, we will support you. While you are in that safe space, we will then investigate into the options available to you and the abuse in which you have suffered, to make sure that those options are suitable for you moving forwards.
And just before I come in on the other one, and it is important as well, we do, we hear the stories about 2 women a week being murdered by partners, and we also, because the way the press and the media, looks at this is about the violence element of domestic abuse, I think also it's worth pointing out there's a lot more in terms of that triangle. Domestic abuse around financial control, about coercive control. So actually we find an awful lot of victims come back who are not in immediate danger in any shape or form. They just need to have the confidence to leave their partner. So in many occasions, when it is about money and control, actually it's really appropriate that they stay in their own home for their own safety and security. Just in terms of linking into county council, though, through our Help Up approach, and through our safeguarding board, we are obliged to work with all partners around domestic abuse. So in terms of, although it's maybe not explicit here, because we don't want people to have to think where to go, as long as you go somewhere. So immediately we will work with the police, children's, if there's children involved, or adult social care, if it's appropriate. So we will look at that, and that type of abuse. So for example, we're seeing more abuse around older people being abused by either carers or their children. We're also seeing adults being abused by their children. So that's been, we're seeing quite an increase in that. So we will use children's, or work with children's and adult social care. So although it's not implicit in here, behind the scenes, and that absolutely does work. And that's a partnership that's really strong.
Shane, thank you. You'll be pleased to know that you probably answered 2 of my questions within the first couple of sentences. But there's just one question sort of outstanding, and that's, I understand that this puts all the policies into sort of one place, but apart, Daha accreditation, what are the benefits of it apart from a piece of paper? Is there something more to it?
We want to be making sure that we are a leader in this field. It's an incredibly important part of our housing function, and for us to be able to say that we are a leader without having an accreditation which proves that we are would make it very difficult. So I think it's incredibly important to make sure we do that. They're also supporting us a lot. So they're telling us what we should be doing. So we all think we're amazing until someone actually reviews what we do, and then we start seeing that, you start to see holes, because you don't see the holes in your own work while you're working on it. So they're essentially auditing us as well and providing that service, so then we know what actions we need to be able to take.
Jonathan.
Yeah, couple of questions. Where, for instance, you've said obviously that the housing associations are getting involved with it. If it was a couple living in a property that, you know, we, like, say maybe a housing association, but actually even just any property, and we've helped the person move, if you know what I mean, so that they're no longer in danger. Would we then work with any of the other agencies to deal with, because surely the person can then just move in another partner and then 6 months down the line we're dealing with the same sort of situation? Is this something which, you know, would that person then be just left in the property, or would they be moved as well? Or?
Can I just clarify? So are you talking about, so someone's fled, domestic abuse, we've given them a new home, and now are you talking about the perpetrator remaining in that house?
Yeah.
Right, that's perfect, thank you. So this is a bit boring and technical, sorry. I can't help but answer it in a technical way. If someone, when you have a joint tenancy, so you're assuming these people are joint tenancy, you then sign up another tenancy, you have to serve a notice to quit at that point, and that notice to quit is effective on both tenants. So if he is still in that property, he then doesn't have a tenancy because it ceased to exist. That allows the landlord to take action upon that person, remaining person, through the courts, because he doesn't have a tenancy, so he has no right to remain. But they go through the court process to do it.
No, that has answered.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of points. Am I right in thinking basically this is a way of benchmarking ourselves against some pre-existing targets, so that rather than us having to develop our own targets, waste resource in recreating something which already exists elsewhere, which is already considered to be the right answer? I'm seeing you're nodding, so that's good. Also, I put no change in service delivery is required to implement this policy. I presume that just simply means there's no budgetary implication, there's no accreditation fee that we know of. Is that?
There was a fee, but actually that was picked up by Norfolk County Council, which was good of them. So.
Thank you to any county councillors in the room. I see one pointing and taking the credit. They can do a victory lap now. Okay. Oh, I've got one other question, but I'll let you come in at that point, Fran.
I didn't want to take any credit, but actually, the DAHA do provide a lot of different training, which we can access online, and I've accessed a lot of it online. So I think it's really, really valuable just for that alone. Obviously, I spoke about us all having training like face-to-face, which obviously we have done before, and I think that's better. But I just want to make that point. But yeah, I'm very pleased that the tab was picked up by county. Yeah.
Just to build on to that, so county were giving extra burdens funding to be able to do this, so that's part of the way in which we utilise that funding. We were giving extra burdens money as well, about £37,000 per council. We've put additional staff into place to be able to provide support to people. So there's no extra cost to be able to do this, but there was cost which has been funded by the government anyway.
And my final question, really, I know it says DAHA accreditation foundation level. Is this a grade that means that there is like a foundation level, extension level, or gold level, platinum level? You know what I mean? There's obviously different levels of this. Is this something which we're going to work towards stepping this up, or are we happy that this meets our needs so we don't need to step it up beyond that?
So at present, this is a tremendous amount of work to be able to get to foundation level. We would like to go higher. I would like to come back later to address if we would like to go higher, but because of the impact it has on various other policies, such as the allocations policy, we're now currently reviewing that. We need to make sure everything's in place before I start going, let's go for the gold standard, let's get everything correct so we can build upon that afterwards.
Just to, you know, in case there's any concern about that, you know, that the foundation is the benchmark level, and, you know, in terms of keeping residents safe and victims safe, you know, that is the benchmark level. If we then choose to then do further stuff, it's only enhancing a good service. So the foundation is the benchmark.
Martin.
I think it's also true that from the foundation to the gold level, a lot of the stuff that's in between in those stages, we are probably already doing, but not being audited and they're on it. So there's that thing of you are doing it probably in one way, shape or form.
Lacey.
Thank you. I just want to say, when this came to communities, we looked at the Broadland District Council Domestic Abuse page, and there was the tab to leave quickly was at the top. It wasn't a floating tab. You've corrected that, so thank you. That is there as a floating tab.
Which it should be, yeah. So that got done very quickly as soon as I identified it. But thank you for identifying it.
I think I'd like to move to the recommendation to agree the policy for supporting residents experiencing domestic abuse. All those in favour?
And that's unanimous, Chairman.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your presentations. I know you may be hanging around. We go to the next agenda item, the tenancy policy, with Richard and Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to find the page, so I've got it now. Thank you. 32. Thank you. So as you're all aware, we are now a registered provider and have the capability to provide a range of tenancies under the Localism Act 2011. It is essential that the council now has a tenancy policy itself. Much of this document, however, will not ever be utilised unless we choose the business model in which we provide our tenancies. However, each tenancy that the council can provide in law must be explored and detailed when it would be utilised to allow justification of why such a tenancy will not be provided. And I know that sounds a bit flipping on its head, but what we do not want to be in a position that someone says, I've been in temporary accommodation for a while, I believe you have implied a secure tenancy and the rights in which that provides you, because we can fall back onto this tenancy policy and say, no, the circumstances you would have received a secure tenancy is X, Y, Z. You have been provided a licence, so therefore you are not provided the rights and responsibilities that come from that. The policy also clarifies how the council will support tenancy sustainment and prevent unnecessary eviction, tackle tenancy fraud and ensure the appropriate management of tenancies. I wasn't going to go any further, I was going to field any questions.
Paul.
Hi. I've just got one question. I'm assuming that this is duplication of South Norfolk's tenancy policy? Was it not? It can't be. Is it bespoke to us? Can't be, surely.
No, well, they don't have one at the moment. But we are working through the same policy. Are you going to find a South Norfolk I've missed within the tenancy? Yes, I am apologise. I've worked very, very hard to identify them all. They don't have one. We're both going through the governance process at the same time. I do apologise if I have missed one.
To save a job, would you like to tell them what page it's on?
I will be, before we go to Cabinet, because I know Richard's, and I've double checked this as well, and so I've got it wrong as well. So we will go with this with an absolute fine tooth comb before it gets to Cabinet.
Please assure you, I pressed Control F and I've looked so many times. I don't know how it's been missed. I've looked for South, Norfolk and SNC and okay.
Has anybody else got anything else that Shane? And then I'll come to Fran, then to Martin.
Yeah, just seeking some clarification here. On page 38, it states, where vulnerability exists, the tenancy should not normally be terminated unless evidence can be produced to show the tenant has failed to engage or has not worked successfully with their support networks to improve tenancy conduct. I think my question here is what happens if there is no support network, or if the person hasn't got a support network to be supported by, which can often happen under things like under sort of mental health provisions.
It's very rare by the time it comes to an eviction that support has not been offered. We have so many different systems in place to make sure that the appropriate support will be put into place from a multi-agency point of view. We also have our own in-house support provision not just through the community connectors, but we have a tenancy support officer which sits within our rough sleeper team, which is solely there to stop people from being at risk of rough sleeping, so they can go in and intervene. If someone has got to that point, I've got a case right now where they got into rent arrears and they got a suspended possession order. At that point, tons of support was put into place. They didn't use it, they didn't utilise it, and they ended up getting eviction. If that support was not being put into place, by the time they come to my service and it was identified that they should have been put into place, they wouldn't be intentionally homeless, and we would continue to support them. It's only when that support is offered, not taking up for unjustifiable reasons, will someone ever be found intentionally homeless. And then even if someone is found intentionally homeless, that just means that they can't get access to a social house. It doesn't mean that we're not going to provide them assistance in gaining other accommodation, more likely to be supported accommodation, because if they've struggled in one social house, they're more likely to struggle in another, and therefore they need a period of time within supported accommodation to allow them to address their needs.
Frank.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things really I want to clarify. On page 38, we talk about the secure tenancies, and it's saying that one of the things you can do is rent out rooms. It says, though not sublet the whole property. To what extent is that? I mean, could you just keep the front room for yourself and rent out the rest? It's just just to be clear where we are. But also the other question I want to ask you is actually on page 43, and I know Norwich City, but others as well. But we're talking here about the age of children. Sort of children under 10 will be expected to share a bedroom regardless of gender. But we don't explicitly say that children over 10 will be given their own bedroom, of different gender. So I know it's implicit in that, but do we need to be really explicit that if a child is over, if we've got two children of different genders over 10, that they should then be expected to be in their own bedrooms? I just wondered if we needed that clarity in the policy. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking. I think the action I'll take for that one, if that's okay, is I'm going to review what it says in the allocations policy, because I think it would be very sensible if the wording was correct both sides. Yeah, so I'll have if that's okay, I'll take that away as an action to see if we can see if I want to align that. And then if they're not the same, we'll have a look at when we go through the allocations policy review, looking at those wordings. In respect to your first question, rent a room, that's in place to stop to encourage lodging. So you still want, if someone's living in a 3-bedroom house, they're not going to move over love nor money. They can't afford it. They're paying bedroom tax. It makes sense for them to offer that up as a house share to allow them to do so. They would have to ask permission. Now, I can sit here, unless we have a complete remodel of a way in which we're going to start renting out houses, to say that this will not happen. So I'm putting my old hat on when I used to deal with these queries in my last council, which has stock. Your situation you spoke about, we wouldn't allow. You can't fill up a house and then just allow someone in their bedroom, because that's open to vulnerabilities. You're going to end up potentially in a cocoon situation. However, if someone comes up to you and says, I've got a 2-bedroom flat, I'm really struggling with bedroom tax, can I lodge it to someone else? I'll charge them rent, and then that gives them a little bit of income. 100% we should allow that, because you end up minimising 2 potential homeless cases in one flat, which is a very positive thing.
But the bottom line is that they need permission, so they couldn't go beyond what would be considered reasonable. That's all I'm saying. It's because the way it reads, you could fill your house up. Thank you.
They would need permission, and to be honest, they normally call because they want to know how much money they can charge and therefore get out of benefits. So they would normally call.
Martin.
Thank you. I was glad you clarified at the beginning that this one's in place because of the other policies to ensure, but this one wouldn't happen. So, in what circumstances then would this tenancy policy come into force for Broadland District Council? Would it be on the acquisition of something else?
So at the moment we're purchasing NAF properties that's being placed within Broadland Living, so none of those properties will fall into this tenancy policy. The only time we'll have that is if we start choosing to become a stock retaining authority ourselves. Within the policy it details licences, and it says specifically licences are a tenancy or a licence. So the only situations at the present that we actually afford people an agreement in effect is when they're in temporary accommodation and they're given a licensed tenancy. So the answer to your question is, if our model stays as it is, 99% of this report will never actually be utilised, but we can show, if we are ever challenged, when it would have been and therefore why they haven't had it.
Yeah, I was really pleased that you clarified that right at the beginning, because that then makes perfect sense to the other bit. And the other bit was, I was picking up the Flanagan before he asked it, was around the charging element of allowing the rental and there. So if they're taking up a tenancy, would they be in receipt of the other benefits, and therefore would, if they're allowing to part let, does that change all the benefits, etc. that they've been receiving?
The short answer is yes, it does change the benefits. The extent in which I can't completely clarify, you're allowed to charge up to a certain amount before it starts impacting on your benefits as a lodger, so therefore you end up with more money coming in. I think it's something up to like £35 a week or something like that for a bedroom, and then that doesn't impact your benefits. Anything over that, then it starts impacting how much, it starts counting as an income, but anything up to there it doesn't. So it's, what they're trying to do is encourage people to lodge, but not make it as a money-making scheme.
That's where I was trying to get to that we're not discouraging the allowance of the rental by then subjecting them to less benefits in those respects. But yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Just one very quick question. It comes to mind that is this policy being put in place because the long-term goal of the council is to become a social housing provider in competition with housing associations?
That's not a decision for officers to necessarily make, especially on their own. There is no desire at present, and if that were to happen, it would be a member-led decision anyway to push forward. But please don't think there was any ulterior motive whatsoever. We are making sure that we're covering ourselves rather than any other motive.
And I think, and just, you know, for us to be a housing provider compared to some of our, you know, houses like Clarion and Saffron, etc. I mean, you know, we're in a completely different league.
Thank you. If we've got nobody else wanting to ask anything, I think we move to the recommendation for Cabinet to recommend to Council the tenancy policy. All those in support of the recommendation? Yeah. I thought Paul was being belligerent for a moment. He was just reading it carefully. Thank you very much. We move on to the temporary accommodation placement policy. Richard and Mike again.
Thank you, Chair. And I do apologise, there's so many coming through at once. So the temporary accommodation placement policy, the purpose for this document is to set out Broadland's policy for accommodating homeless people in temporary accommodation. This document has not been required as before for a couple of reasons. One, our numbers have not been as high as they are now. Second thing is we've had plenty of spot purchase stock around within our area, so we haven't had to be forced to place outside of area. And the third reason is we haven't had the amount of temporary accommodation stock we now own as our own. So we need to make sure people are placed within our stock wherever possible and wherever it works for them. We may find, the example I use is, say someone, their mum is in Spixworth and they said, I'm fleeing, I want temporary accommodation, not fleeing, but I want temporary accommodation and I would like to stay in Spixworth when we've got a perfectly decent house for them within the area that they need, but it's not within specific Spixworth. We need to look at we need to be financially sensible with where we're placing people, and we do not want to have that temporary accommodation sitting there empty when we're paying Spixworth 450 quid a week, for example, to be placed in there. At present, we have no formal policy to be able to challenge any to push back on any challenge we receive. This policy allows a framework for us to be able to push back if we were ever to go through the formal process and go to Ombudsman. At present, that's never happened. However, we shouldn't wait for something like that to happen. We should make sure we have the framework in place. I won't list all the statutory reasons of why it happens. I think that's where I was going to get to within this one, unless there are any further questions.
Thank you. So, Eleanor.
Hi, yeah, I think it's already been pointed out that on page 51 that the policy has South Norfolk Council on, listed on it. I just wondered when this was adopted and last reviewed, because the sign off on the policy seems to be 2019, which is obviously some time ago. And I think in the policy it says it should be reviewed every year.
Yeah, just to make it clear, South Norfolk doesn't have this policy, so I don't know where that box has come from. I think that's their start date. So I will review that. South Norfolk does not have a temporary accommodation placement policy. We're going through exactly the same governance process over at South Norfolk as well. I apologise for that. Control F doesn't find a picture clearly, does it? So I do apologise for that. But no, neither has. This is a brand new policy for both because we do not have it. I'll look at that. I don't know why it says those dates there because it should not. I honestly think that's when they started in that current role, and that's why we've got a date there for some reason. Okay.
Shane. Thank you. If I can take you to page 53, 4.4. It talks about where it's considered suitable accommodation, and I've got this with sort of mental health in mind again. I must admit, but is there a definitive list to what the council considers as suitable, or is it a subjective decision and open to interpretation? And also, is there any kind of agreement between the person and the council as to what might be considered suitable?
So suitability is defined in law. However, that's a basic, and we go above that. We have a team of officers that provide support to people while they're in temporary accommodation, housing and benefit advisors. We do not want to be placing people in unsuitable places because they become very difficult to manage. For example, suitability does not necessarily define the geographical area in which we have to do. This is why you see many London boroughs who find it very difficult because of the area in which they are placing. You hear about awful stories about people being placed in Manchester even though they're fleeing to into London. So whilst I cannot say what the definitive criteria is, because if you start doing that, you will always miss people. Because you're dealing with vulnerable people, you can list someone, if you say someone with mental health concerns, that's a very overarching statement which covers a whole spectrum of mental health conditions. So it accommodates with it in legislation. However, legislation provides the bare bone. All I can say, and I know it's very difficult to say out loud, is we do not want to be placing people in suitable accommodation because it becomes far more difficult to deal with them as a homeless case and to support them within temporary accommodation. So operationally, it makes no sense to place people in difficult places. Now, someone with mental health, just to build onto that though, someone with mental health concerns may be difficult to place because of people will not accept them. We have very good working relationships with various organisations who may may take them on. Also in Broadland, you have a private sector leasing stock, which we control. We are the landlords essentially, and we can often place people in there as a last resort. So, and one final thing, even though we might place them further away to begin with, we always endeavour to bring them closer to where they need to be. Once again, to operationally support them is far harder if they're in Brandon, for example, because there's a temporary accommodation stock there, which we don't own, but it's we can spot purchase. As soon as we can get them closer to our area, we will, so we can provide that support that they need.
Jonathan.
Yeah, this leads on from that, where obviously in that we say the offer of temporary accommodation reject them because we consider it suitable. I heard of a person in our area the other week who had come from a Suffolk-based council who'd placed them in Dereham, and as far as they were concerned, obviously wasn't very suitable for them, and that's why then they'd gone into Norwich, and I think then come out to obviously our areas. We are, obviously, just to clarify, we wouldn't do that, would we? We wouldn't on purposely put someone somewhere so they sort of came off our books, because that's what it looked like to me, that they were moving them from one place to another, knowing that they would be off their books, because they would say, oh, that's suitable. The person would say, no, it's not, but they would say, well, we've helped you, goodbye as such. But we wouldn't do that. But how do we stop other councils sort of giving us the extra people?
I can't. Yeah. So we will never do that.
Yeah.
If I ever place out of area, it's solely because no one else is going to take that person, and there's a place in Brandon, which their business model is charge a lot because occasionally someone will probably smash it up, and therefore we've got the money to be able to do it. So their threshold to take someone on is far higher. So we're really thankful for that business model because that allows us to place people and keep them off the streets. But that's the only time we really we really place out of area because it's a necessity. Other councils will do as you say. I can't comment on that individual case because I do not know the level of vulnerabilities. It may be that Dereham was the only place that was prepared to take that case. We will never do that, but I know other councils do.
Martin.
You're saying about the Brandon one, and it is obviously more expensive. Is there a volume, a year-on-year volume of people placed in there, and what that's costing us?
I can get the exact figures if needed, but due to their price, we do not go there unless we really, really, really have to. Okay, it's a necessity rather than a standard.
And did we have some in Yarmouth as well, or did I make that one up? I thought we'd have.
So we do have some private sector leasing there. It's suitable for people. We don't force them there. They'll be there. It may be, however, we may use Yarmouth for a period of time while we find them more suitable closer to Norwich. It's again better for them to be there than off the streets. We are looking to review our PSL stock to bring them closer to home. There is a financial impact on there. So you may get two places in Yarmouth for the price of one in Norwich, for example. So you have to make sure that there's a range. But we've got to realise we border onto Yarmouth, so it's not a million miles away, and it might be really suitable for someone. Yeah. Yes.
Simon.
I did some work with St Martin's a couple of years ago on a very short-term assessment centre that they set up in Norwich. But I remember seeing in the papers there was some money that came from Broadland. So can you still access some of the St Martin's properties in Norwich? So the very short-term assessment centre that was set up in Recorder Road. So
that money was put through Pathways. We didn't feel like we were getting good value for that money. So for that, we've stopped funding that scheme, especially as we had our own rough sleeper accommodation. It wasn't so necessary. Anyone can go to St Martin's and gain for support, so we will still make referrals into there. We have alongside South Norfolk, we have a robust supported accommodation offer within our area, so rather than just focusing on one, we support them all the best we can through our benefit system, but also through our partnership approach.
Thank you very much for that. I think we should vote on the recommendation. I won't read it out. We can read it ourselves. All those in favour of the recommendation stated.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Again, thank you very much. I won't ask you to leave your seat. We now move on to the private rented sector offer policy, and it's Richard and Mike.
Thank you very much, Chair. So what page? Thank you. So, access to housing continues to be quite a challenge. Our housing register continues to go up. We need a policy that allows us to empower people to consider other options. So, at present, we do have people within our temporary accommodation who, for example, might be intentionally homeless, so therefore they're on a lower priority, and they're just going to wait for a social house. They may be working. We've got lots of people coming through our system now who unfortunately are working, who have failed to, whose their private rental, their landlord decided to sell the property. They're sitting there going, this is nice, I might be able to get that social house I hear everybody else gets. They're working, they can afford a private rental property. If it's suitable for them, they can afford it. We should be able to make an offer to them to say, this is suitable. If you do not accept this property, we will be looking to discharge our homeless duty. If everybody falls onto the social housing register, we are not creating more houses, we are creating more competition for the people who can't afford that private rental property. Therefore, those who can should be empowered to do so. Okay, that's the end.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Shane and then Eleanor?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just a quick question on page 63.3. So the council needs but does not have a published statement on the use of private rented sector offers. Is there a proposal to have one?
So what paragraph is that? Oh, I've gone past it. So, yeah. So that's what this policy is. This policy is a statement to say how we will be utilising private rental as an offer to discharge our homeless duty.
Hi, yeah, same paragraph 3, just the figures. They are the figures for Broadland alone, are they? The 321 and 136. And if so, it says in the past 12 months. Is that from March, or you know what actual dates did you take those figures from?
So they are for Broadland only, and for when, no, I'm not even going to guess. It's when I started writing the report, which was probably about 4 months ago now. So so when I started going through the governance process, that's when those figures were created.
Thanks.
Martin.
Thank you. I don't think I missed it, but I might have done. Is there anywhere a volume of the private sector properties that we've lost? So amount of that we've lost over, say, the past year or whatever, that is then creating us a problem?
Not specifically to our area. The figures are banded around depending on the area, but you are looking between 25 and 45% of a construction of private rental offer at the moment. So it's shrinking quite considerably.
Can I just ask, on point 6.1, the resource implications, it says one potential impact for resources is that temporary accommodation use and therefore costs will be reduced as the council is able to better use the private rented sector. Can you just flesh that out a little bit, just so that it makes a little bit more sense? I understand that we're saying we could have savings because, but I don't quite, perhaps my brain doesn't quite compute the because bit.
So there's two reasons why our TA spend is constantly going up at the moment, and that's is demand, but it's also throughput from people gaining that house. If they are sitting there waiting for that social house, they are still costing us money. If they're in our own accommodation, it's not so bad because, let's face it, they're paying us rent essentially in a property. However, we continue to have more demand than we have stock. So although they're paying us, someone else will be in a B&B somewhere and I'm paying for them. So we need to get the numbers down by not only preventing homelessness, but also getting people out of temporary accommodation as quickly as they possibly can into the right and appropriate accommodation. So that paragraph details that if we can move on from TA, your overall TA cost will end up reducing.
We're moving people from expensive short-term accommodation to a much more reasonable longer-term accommodation.
Yes, that's right, effectively. And ultimately, where we want to be is that expensive temporary accommodation is also temporary accommodation, and we've seen that in the news about that's not appropriate for particularly families. So we want to move them into their longer term accommodation. That's better outcome for the taxpayer, better outcome for the family or the individual.
Thank you, Paul.
I have a little question on the private rented sector then. So if you're saying a lot of families being evicted or not having their tenancy agreements extended because someone wants to sell the property, is there nothing that we can do as a district council to try and force the private landlord to keep them in there for a certain amount of time? Is there anything that we can do to stop them being evicted so that we can, give them 6 months to look for somewhere else or something? Is there anything that we can do as a council to end up with our legislation?
Not legislation, but that's the work in which our housing solutions officers do on a daily basis. So we do have, we used to have a whatever it takes fund, but we have other bits and pots of money that we can utilise just to say, can you just buy them a little bit more time to be able to search for their property? People often come to us and go, my landlord's decided to sell a house, he's put a for sale sign out, I need to present as homeless today, and we'll go, no, you've got to still sell the house. It could be a 3-4 month process. So we ask for the landlord's number and start negotiating with them. The landlord will sometimes provide notice, but only because they're scared that if they don't do so, by the time they want to sell the house, it won't be vacant possession and there'll be problems. If we start working with that landlord to begin with and reassure them at the point in which that they need them out, we will start providing with temporary accommodation. They're more likely to provide them with that accommodation for a little bit longer. So very much these are all the tools we use to try and keep people out of temporary accommodation as long as possible, with the hope of finding them an alternative house so they never even have to go to temporary accommodation, they just move to their new home.
Is that written in a process somewhere that these are the things that happen? But would it be useful to put it in this process?
So it's not, if I put it in here, it's going to go into a policy. So then if anything changes, I have to come back to committees to change them, whereas this is more guidance to officers. So this is bread and butter stuff that they utilise on a day-to-day basis. It's all within training manuals, it's what they have to do. So I could put it in there, but then it restricts any changing that we may need to do, because the private rental sector is ever changing. So skills and tools and money I might have from one government incentive might change the way in which we behave in another way. I'd rather it stayed within team procedures rather than it went anywhere near an actual core policy, if that makes sense.
Eleanor.
Hi, yeah, on page 65 it says the council has a buoyant, this is in the third paragraph down, it says the council has a buoyant private sector accommodation market. Should it say the district has a, surely we don't as a council, do we have a buoyant private sector market?
Ooh, yeah, that would be, and we'll have that changed, because it's absolutely right, it should be a district. The council doesn't have it, it's the district.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything else to ask? Jonathan?
Right. I see this as quite sensible. If someone is coming to you and can afford to privately rent, as opposed to be housed in social housing. So let's just take it that the private rent is 1,000 and the social housing rent is 500, and they can afford to pay the 1,000. We should not be putting them in the 500. How does that work with the social housing policy of, well, obviously once someone gets the social housing, that's theirs for life, as it were. So there could be, we're turning someone away and saying, you've got to privately rent and it's going to cost you 1,000, when there's someone in a better position in a social housing, only paying 500, who could afford to do that 1,000 as well, but they're just lucky because they've got into the social housing before it became a squeeze to get into the social, it was more difficult to get into it. So we're not challenging that person and saying, you could now afford to spend 1,000 in private rented, because they're already in the social property. So that is obviously a strain on the resources we've got, but there's nothing we can do about it because that's in our policy that that's their property until they want to move. Yeah. I'm just a bit concerned that we're saying to someone, you've got enough money, you can privately rent, but someone might be in a better position already in social housing, and they're saying, I could rent, but why would I then increase double my costs? No one would ever choose to do that. And I'm just thinking it's a bit unfair on the people who we're now talking to say you can privately rent, therefore you should, when someone might be in a better position. That might be someone they know, it might be someone in the next street. And I just wondered how we can justify that, if you know what I mean.
So the individual you're talking about, they would have had to have come through our system to gain access to that house. And within the allocations policy, it has a income threshold. So if someone comes to us and says, I need a social house, and we'll go, well, you can afford a private rental property, they won't be afforded access because they're over that income threshold. Now, what you're saying is true. When someone gets that house, they're in that house for life, and they can keep that house for life. Now, there's arguments either way, and I can't. You're talking about essentially government legislation. Now, they tried some years ago to create fixed-term tenancies. However, the courts weren't willing to go ahead with that. And what you found was that a lot of landlords said, why would I evict someone who can afford to pay their rent and they're great tenants? So they ended up keeping them tenancies. So you're talking about a complete rethink about housing policy, which I think is beyond my control.
and one of the issues that we'll have, if you have someone, they come in to social housing and they're absolutely eligible, they get themselves back on their feet, they get promoted at work and they get more money, and so then we're evicting someone for doing well. Yeah. So you're absolutely right, it is by its very nature social housing has inequalities built into it, and this is one of those inequalities that exists. You're absolutely right.
Thank you. Adrian.
Yeah, just a quick point of clarification. In Appendix 1, page 63, it says the PRSO is an offer of a shared short-hold tenancy of at least 12 months. But in here, you've got that final accommodation offer, that's you're saying 6 months. So which should it be? Or is that slightly different, the final offer to that offer or definition of a PRSO in the appendix?
Sorry, this is a technical, geeky answer. There's 3 stages of homelessness. You have prevention, triage, and main duty. No, prevention, relief, and main duty. In legislation, a suitable offer of private rental property at 6 months is suitable to discharge your duty within the relief stage. Once you get into the main duty stage, it has to be 12 months. Okay, so pre-56 days, you're facing an eviction on the first. 56 days running into there, you'll fall under statutory prevention. 56 days after that, so you're in temporary accommodation, but you're only just within there, you're under relief and therefore a 6-month offer is suitable. Once you're past that, you're you're more longer term homelessness and you need a 12-month offer. So it's reflecting the various legislative what's the word I'm looking for, tools in which we have available to us.
Thank you. I think we'll move to the recommendation. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
I should have said that into the microphone for all our listeners. We move on to agenda item 11, procedure for conducting internal statutory reviews of homelessness decisions, again with Richard and Mike presenting.
Sorry, Chair, I got excited and I thought we were on to the next agenda, so I've brought myself back. So at present, no, actually I'll start by saying there's various times in which a decision can be challenged by our residents. I've talked about intentionally homeless, for example. If someone says, you haven't paid your rent, you've been evicted, you're intentionally homeless, that's a decision which means that the rights available to them are diminished significantly. They should be able to challenge that decision. There should be a mechanism by which they can say they don't agree with that. At present, Broadland does not have a system in place to allow them to do so. So there's no delegation in place. Now, what we've been doing up till now is doing what pretty much everybody else does, which is whoever makes the decision, someone senior, when they're asked to review, reviews that original decision of the officer to see whether they agree on that or not. That's accepted by Shelter, it's accepted by everyone. Okay? So we haven't been challenged on that point because everybody, it's kind of accepted that it must be within the policy. However, we can't just keep going along like that. We need to have something in line. That's the statutory minimum. However, I think I'd like to go further. I really value member involvement in reviewing our cases. I want to make sure we are behaving in a way as an officer team in a way in which the member set would like us to do so. So in addition to that senior officer making that decision, what we are proposing is 6 monthly, we will do a report which details all the cases that have been reviewed, which there aren't that many, but there may be more as we get more demand. And we will review that with a portfolio holder, relevant portfolio holder, and the leader of the council to make sure we are acting in a way that we should, as you would like us to be doing so. The other reason why I really like member involvement is because, as I'm sure I've had a number of councillor complaints, probably from a number of people in this room, when you hear one side of a story, it becomes the council are horrible, they're doing X, Y, Z. When you start looking into reviews and you see the way and the extent in which my team go the extra mile to be able to support people, you start really seeing the efforts which are there, and that then creates a better reputation for my team as well, and I want that to continue within that. So that's why we put that extra step above the statutory minimum. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask? Oh, I thought we'd bet ourselves out. Shane and then Mark.
Sorry, I'm fully supportive of the of this one, but it's just a quick grumble actually. On page 70, 4.7, there's a bit of jargon there that doesn't explain what it is before you've actually mentioned it. It's one of my pet hates. And also page 97, even though we haven't got there, but there's a bit of jargon going on without an explanation. Can we put that in, please?
Is that H-click?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Okay, the problem is I can't. The H doesn't stand for anything. It's just that's what it is. So what I might do is just remove the word H-click and just put. Oh, is there? Thank you very much. We will change that. That's what it stands for. Thank you very much.
Mark.
I just wanted to say that I think any department that puts themselves willfully forward to be scrutinised by members is obviously very confident of what they're doing, and I implore it.
Thank you. It's a positive thing to say. That I'm sure many of us would echo. All I was going to say was, obviously this takes an extraordinary amount of time, as you've said here, to review a case. It can take up to a week. So I think anything which can make the clarity and the speed of decisions and the streamline this process in any way, if it's going to save just 10% of the time, it's half a day for someone. So that's to be welcomed. It's going to save considerable time for doing other parts of the job. That's all I was going to offer from my side. Anybody got anything else they'd like to ask or say? We'll move straight away to the recommendation then. All those in favour of the recommendation?
And that's unanimous again, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now move to, I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business, because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information